you get the wrong, if you design the system with the wrong head, or you pick the wrong pump when you did both, you push the water, you're trying to get this flow clear to the ends, and all you're doing is feeding these couple lines right here. What's it going to do? You're loading all that water we designed to go across the whole length. You're loading it right here on this mound, and right there is where it goes.
No, thanks.
So you plug some of the holes, you can get that to happen. You do, like what you're talking, long pump, that can happen. I think we had one, it struggled, but I think what the guy did there is, if anybody's familiar with pumps, I think he ran 14 2-wire out too long to the pump station, set the pump, and it just was struggling to pump at the flow rate it was supposed to pump. It was either that, or he sent that pump was in dilemma. It was just struggling with water. Never did go out, but it's not a good situation. And that is the pump. The pump and the LPP is integral to this. And those of you who are service providers will just go ahead and say, your piece in this whole equation is, we need to get these things flushed. Right now, we do not have an O&M program that deals with these. One day in the future, we might partner busy enough to try to take care of what we've got. But these things need flushed. They need to be, it's recommended twice a year. Keep the laterals cleaned out, things should work the way they should. Check the pump, check the squirt height, and it should work properly. We need to get these things cleaned. Keep the tanks cleaned out, the screen, the filters cleaned out. We're going to go a lot farther ahead with the operation of these systems. Any other questions? Yeah.
You're talking about the shielding using of Easy Flow. Can Easy Flow, using it for the shielding aspect, can you replace the aggregate with Easy Flow if you're using blanks and...
Sure. Yep, absolutely.
So instead of a gravel bed on top of this mountain, we can build the bed out of Easy Flow.
Or infiltrator too. You sure can. And the nice thing about any of those choices, maybe the Easy Flow and the 4-inch pipe, infiltrator makes it harder. If you get a plug or you get something you just cannot get fixed, you cut it, pull it out the end, re-drill it, a new one, slide it back in, re-glue it, and you're back in business. Have fun doing that with the little Orca shield cast that you put on there. You never want to do that. You're going to dig the whole thing back up. I got to think that infiltrator is going to be the same issue. Because you zip tie those things down, you're going to have a terrible time ripping them back out. So it's a nice thought to be able to get in there and pull it out and do it.
You guys put curtain drains around here?
Sometimes if we have, but this is the upslope side here, and we've got concerns about water getting it, a lot of them will put an interceptor drain. We won't put one on the bottom because we don't want to catch any of that.
A lot of times they do a lot of them for our town, like that. And they do right out the front edge.
You're probably thinking of pine tree mounds. That's a whole other animal.
Yeah.
Other things going on.
So they are.
Pine tree mounds were designed to basically do what you just said. Put it in the ground, get the curtain drain close enough to suck it out.
That doesn't work.
And crush your fingers on the tree. So that's,
So they're don't even.
yeah, we don't really, we used to, might have put less than 10 of those in. We've got a 100-foot lateral. Okay? And every foot of that lateral holds 0.092 gallons. Every foot. And we have a 185-foot plus some change. We'll just go 185-foot force main that holds 0.163 gallons. The lateral holds 9.2 gallons. The force main holds 30 gallons. Okay? When we dose the system, we want 5 times the internal volume of the laterals times 5 equals 45 gallons. But why? When we push the water up in there, the first filling is just going to bleed out at the very beginning until the whole thing's pressurized. Right? We're going to have some preferential flows at the beginning until it pressurizes, then we're going to get it. So we want 5 times the internal volume to pressurize the whole thing and get a fairly equal flow out of it. 5 times the internal volume is kind of the magic number in all the documents to define. So we want 45 gallons to be delivered up to the system, but we got to fill the force main too, right? You got to get it from the pump tank up to here. You got to fill all of that, and then you got to fill that 5 times. So we add the two together. $75 gallons. Why do you hit it with 30 gallons every time the 2-inch force main? Because if you were smart and you had, if your mound is up here and you were feeding down from the pump tank back here, and you realize you're only 1.5 to 2 feet deep, what are you going to be concerned about? Freezing. So every time you dose, you're going to deliver your 45 gallons up here. You're going to fill this pipe, and then the 30 gallons is going to drain back every time. Hit it with 75 gallons, 45 goes in the system, 30 drains back. If you don't, it seems kind of non-productive, and it is, but it's better than the alternative, freezing the line. So every time you do this, you're going to be filling your force main every time, unless you're pumping downhill. Sounds stupid, but it can be done. So if you're pumping downhill to the mound, and it happens, then, well, you still got to do it. You got to fill this up and get it. But what do you got to worry about? Siphonage. You pump that thing on and you deliver all that water. No, you want to take that back. You're only going to deliver this much because you don't want those 30 gallons to go in, because it's all going to go down to the bottom. But if you don't protect this thing against siphonage, you might have wanted to send 75 or 30, 45 gallons down, but you're going to send the whole lift tank down. Drill a hole right here. Give it a weep hole. Let it pressurize. When it's done, it can suck air and go to siphon. We've seen it happen. Anybody have that happen to them? You suck that lift tank dry if you're not careful. So you do want to make sure that you set it up, protecting against siphonage there, protecting against freezing here. Okay? So we figured out the dose volume. Now we need to figure out the time dose. So let's just do this way. We talked about time dosing. In our county, what we did was we said that water should only be dosed to the mound at a minimum separation of 4 hours every dose. So instead of the float just going up and sending it out and going up and sending it out, it'll go up and wait 4 hours and dose. Go up, wait 4 hours and dose. And the reason why we did that is so we weren't having a party, they're coming home from work, and everybody's taking baths and showers. We want to, instead of putting out 150 gallons at one time, let's spread it across the course of the day. That system, anytime you time dose anything, that system will take it down. So we build in the time dosing. It's just a different control panel to make that happen. So that's what the time dosing does. It forces it to wait. If you set it up properly, so if you've got 4-hour wait, the maximum doses per day is 6 doses, right? You program that thing to say, wait 4 hours every time. The maximum dose per day is 6 doses in a 24-hour day. If you heavily exceed that for a very short period of time, the dose tank is required to be 1.5 times the daily design flow. Normal dose tanks are supposed to be 1 times for reserve. This is for reserve. So a normal dose tank may be 360 for reserve. On this one, you're 1.5 times that for this to happen. So if mom and dad party every day, it's going to blow out. But if mom and dad have a party on the weekend, it's going to take care of it and spread it across the days after that. So there's where time dosing helps. It's not the surefire answer. Some time dosing has a demand overlap at some point. But time dosing does help that a little bit. So how do you set up the timer? Basically, the timer panel, when the installer goes to the site, normally the designer is going to say, the flow rate of the pump is this. This is how much needs to go out. So they'll say 75 gallons divided by 31. Run the pump, 2.4 minutes. At that flow rate, you'll deliver that much water. That's what you do. Make sense? He'll tell you that, but you always have to fill verified because it's never exactly right. So we'll have you do a manual pump run to make sure the water delivers at the rate it should. If you do a demand dose, because there are some applications that demand dose is still used, you then figure up your dimensions of your tank, height, length, width, height, equals the total cubic feet inside of that tank, right? Times 7.48 gallons per cubic foot. That'll tell you how much volume is in that tank. Then you determine how high the tank is in inches, and you can say how many gallons of water in every inch of the tank. For demand dosing, a normal 1,000-gallon tank is 20 gallons an inch. And just for the sake of easiness of math here, if I needed an 80-gallon dose, my tank was 20 gallons an inch, how many inches do I set my flow? 4 inches. So demand dosing is just simply done by knowing the internal volume of the tank and how many gallons in every inch of the tank, so that I can demand dose out my 80 gallons. We had an application that Malahide worked on that was a small storage building, and it was set up for 100 gallons a day. You're lucky if it doses once a week at 30-gallon dose. You're lucky. So we just said, you know what, time dosing is not a smart idea in this application. Let's just stick with the demand dose in that case, and that's how you would set that up. Okay? And then, of course, the dose tank has reserve, it has the operating zone, and it has some dead volume. The pump normally does not sit right on the bottom of the tank. Usually you put it up so it can breathe material can settle to the bottom. A lot of you have seen this device already, the plow, and you got to be very careful with it. You got to have a good amount of fall to make it work right. So it can be done if there's an application. We do have some Amish perhaps that may want to. We had he didn't eventually. We almost had an Amishman use this device for his mount. So he didn't have that electricity. I think he used the air compressor instead. So just know that it can possibly be done. Yeah.
I don't know if you've seen it anywhere. I remember one of the classes I went to down at Ohio State about these mounds. Karen Mansell said that these mounds are like a lifetime system, and that the sand will clog up first and keep the ground underneath them clogging up, then you can just dig off and build a new mound on the same spot. Have you seen any evidence that that's true?
That's probably true from what we've seen. I believe, Mike, this is just opinion, only based on a little bit of actual data, that whenever you LPP dose something, your biomat is less. The more you spread out wastewater and the more you spread out that BOD and TSS across the length and the infiltrative surface, you don't get as much slime layer biomat in any one spot. You spread it out. So it's thinner to begin with, right on the sand layer. So if you go through a foot of sand, it's like the old sand, y'all have installed sand fillers. What happens? The top, 3-4 inches? That's where the gunk's at, and it's clean underneath. I think it's the same.
You think the ground underneath would, you'd be able to just take that bad sand off and put new sand on?
Probably, unless it was a bad siting. Let's say that ground was compacted by dump trucks or something. It ain't going to work with that much.
I was just curious if you'd seen anything.
Not other than that, no. But it does make sense. It matches what we've seen with sand filters. Yeah?
Who's saying that you flush it every 6 months? How do you do that?
Normally what you do is, when you come into the center of the mound, normally they put ball valves. So most mounds are fed through the center and they go 2 different directions. And they'll put a ball valve on either side. So you close one side off, make sure the other one's open, pop the cap at the end. There's always a cap for doing your squirt height testing, but also for flushing. So you're now setting twice the flow rate and head through there to scour that stuff out. That normally will accomplish it. If it doesn't, you need something a little more invasive, like something to snake it or scrub it with. But normally, when you do that, I've seen it happen. When you do it, all this crap comes flying out of there, and it's going to go right there. It's going to go out right there. So that's normally, then you let it rest or put more water in the tank, and then you do the other side until you get some clean water. And that squirt height testing, before you even start it, I would always do a squirt height test to see how bad it is. Clean it, flush it, and stick that squirt height test back on at the end and see just how good you did. Normally plugging is going to produce a higher head coming out because it's not going out the holes. See what I mean?
Sure, yeah.
So if it starts higher, you're hoping that it will reduce back to where it should have been. We have all the design parameters here, so if you're ever servicing a system, hey, they designed it with 3.5, the day they put it into service it was 3.5, and today it's 6. We'll tell you it's 6, or it's 5, and then you can drop it, hopefully drop it back down. If you can't, you might be able to say, a little something more needs done.